that evidence.
You are watching 7 News at noon, and we are staying on top of breaking news right now. Jurors just heard the closing arguments in the Lindsay Clancy trial, and they are receiving final instructions from the judge. They will begin deliberations today. The defense arguing that Clancy suffered from postpartum psychosis and should not be held criminally responsible for killing her 3 young children.
But the prosecution says even though she struggled with her mental health, she knew what she was doing at the time. 7's Steve Cooper is live outside of court in Plymouth to start our team coverage on this breaking story. Coop.
Right, so it has been 5 weeks of testimony, 80 witnesses, and dozens and dozens and dozens of pieces of evidence entered here during the trial for jurors to consider, and it won't be long now before they begin the deliberations, and the fate of Lindsay Clancy will be hanging in the balance of that 12-member jury. Now let's back up and talk about these closing arguments that began unfolding first thing this morning. These were closing arguments from the prosecution and the defense, each taking nearly an hour to deliver those arguments. Now, defense attorney Kevin Reddington telling jurors Clancy did nothing wrong in her life, saying she was a good mother, going on to suggest it was the medicine and medical care that failed her, which is why she should be found not criminally responsible for the deaths of her children. Now, Reddington is saying Clancy adored her 3 kids, Cora, Dawson, and Callan, but suffered from postpartum psychosis, struggles she researched on the internet before they say she heard a voice telling her to kill.
Isn't it interesting when you consider objective evidence? Googling slitting a throat. Googling suicide. Googling drugs. Googling side effects. Googling ketamine treatments. Googling all of these drugs. Googling the effects of Tufts medications. Lorazepam, sertraline, hydroxyzine, lorazepam, buspirone, trazodone, fluoxetine, zolpidem, murdazine, clonazepam, quetiapine, diazepam, quetiapine. It goes on and on and on and on and on. You have the chat, you have the descriptions to see. And obviously, she wasn't consuming all of these at the same time, because one thing this kid did was try to do what she was supposed to do. We're talking about when the big men were in there with their guns and their badges and they're sitting outside the door, and they're going to make sure that Lindsay Clancy, paralyzed, chained to the bed, doesn't get up and run away from the hospital, I guess, and they just have to suffer their way through. I guess I worked 8 hours. I had another shift I had to work that night. This is the treatment. And what's important about that is what kind of treatment did this young lady get from the health care providers?
Our prosecutors telling a very different story in their closings of Clancy, saying, yes, she was depressed and was trying to deal with it. However, they wanted to say she was a functioning mother who knew the difference between right and wrong. Prosecutor Jennifer Sprague saying the murders were planned and her stories about hearing a voice to kill her kids makes no sense.
You know that she knew the difference between right and wrong during that time because she had those thoughts at the beginning of December of harming her kids. And she told Patrick and her mother about them. But who she didn't tell is important and very telling. She didn't tell a single provider, not Tufts, not Gelada, not Jennifer McAllister, not Dukes, no one at McLean, no one at MGH, no one at South Shore. Didn't tell any of them. And why? Because the police might take away her kids. That's a rational thought. That telling mandated reporters that you're having a thought of harming your kids, that they might be taken away for their safety, that's a rational thought. And it also shows she knew it was a bad thought, a wrong thought. Because you don't think someone's going to take your kids away because you're thinking something positive or neutral. It's because it's bad, it's because it's wrong, it's because it's against the law. So she knew that it was wrong. And she was able to conform her behavior to the law because she didn't tell those providers. She went in and met with them and talked about what she was experiencing and talked about her depression. And not only did she not tell them, she lied to them.
So there are 18 members of the jury that have been listening to this trial for the past 5 weeks. What's going to happen next is 6 of them will be selected as alternates. The other 12 will then begin the deliberations here. And on the verdict slip, they'll be looking at the possibility of first-degree murder, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter, or not guilty by reason of insanity. Again, at this hour, the judge continues to instruct the jury before they get the case and then begin their deliberations at some point this afternoon. We're live in Plymouth. Steve Cooper, 7 News.
And again, those closing arguments just wrapping up. The defense and prosecution in this case taking very different approaches to their closing arguments. 7's Juliana Mazza live in the newsroom with that part of our coverage. Juliana.
Yeah, Laura, you heard both sides there as they presented those closing arguments in the Clancy case. As you mentioned, each taking a different style in their appeal to the jury. Clancy's defense attorney, Kevin Reddington's closing argument featured a lot of props. The courtroom was filled with poster boards showing text messages and family photos of Lindsay when she was there with her children and her husband, all to show her as a loving mother. Reddington also showed the jury pictures of Lindsay in her hospital bed after her suicide attempt to show the state that she was in at the time of the killings. Many of the items on display during his closing arguments are evidence in this trial, like bottles of pills Clancy had been prescribed. All of these were physical items for the jury to look at and remember as they head into their jury deliberations. And the prosecution's closing argument, a much different approach as well. You know, prosecutor Jennifer Sprague speaking softly to the jury, saying mental health is not on trial and that Clancy had support from both sides of her family and others. The prosecution recapped the Commonwealth's case, reinforcing the testimony from prosecution witnesses who said Clancy did not suffer a psychotic break at the time of the killings. The prosecution told the jury that Clancy was calculated and planned the killings. They pointed to her phone search history, saying it showed Clancy mapped out how long it would take her husband to run errands and added an extra stop when she didn't think it would be enough time to kill the kids and herself before he got home. So now the jury will deliberate and consider all of those facts to decide whether they believe Clancy was in control of her actions on that devastating night. Live in the newsroom, Juliana Mazza, 7 News.
Juliana, thank you. We're joined now by Evan Gottlob, a former state and federal prosecutor. Evan, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me.
So listening to the closing arguments from both the prosecution and the defense, what are your thoughts on what they said to the jury and what stood out to you?
Well, first on Kevin Reddington's closing, he did a very good job of humanizing Miss Clancy and showing that she was a loving person, a loving mother, and she just really had a high level of mental stress in her life that most new parents do or parents with young children do. And he showed that this was really outside of her normal behavior and her mental health really deteriorated and reached a point where she didn't really know what she was doing when she murdered the 3 children. And that has been his defense all along. Well, the prosecutors did what they had to do. They had to focus just on the facts of the case. They had to say that mental health isn't on trial here, but it clearly is, because that's all this case is about. Miss Clancy hasn't said she didn't murder the 3 children. She just said she wasn't under control of her actions when she did so. So I think the prosecution did the best job that they could, but it's a very difficult case for them here.
You know, the trial comes down to one question for this jury. Was Lindsay Clancy a mother suffering from postpartum psychosis, or did she know what she was doing at the time of the killings? I want to ask you, though, mental health, maternal mental health, has been such a focus of this trial. We know the judge said to the jury, you know, you really need to let the outside noise not affect you here. But there is outside noise. There are a lot of people talking about that aspect. How hard is it going to be for the jury moving forward, in your opinion?
It's almost impossible to not listen to the outside noise. Obviously, the attention that this case has gotten, it's been all about mental health. It's been all about those couple of minutes when Lindsay Clancy was alone with her 3 children and the children were killed. It's going to be very, very hard for the jury to look outside what's going on just in the courtroom. Obviously, people hear what's going on. The jury is not, stationed at a hotel without being able to watch the news or talk to anybody else, even though, as the judge correctly has done throughout the trial, instructed them not to. It is going to be extremely difficult to not consider all the noise on the outside. This case is, it's a scientific case. It really comes down to, her mental state and what happened when those 3 children were were just brutally murdered. And the jury's going to have a very difficult time in reaching a decision here.
All right, Evan Gottlieb, 7 News legal analyst, thank you so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
And there were several key moments during this trial, including when Lindsay's former husband, Patrick Clancy, and her mother took the stand. 7's Victoria Price has more on those major moments.
In January of 2023, did Lindsay ever tell you that she wanted to harm your children?
No.
Did she ever tell you she was going to kill your children?
No.
The most anticipated testimony in Lindsay Clancy's trial happened at the very beginning, as the prosecution called her former husband Patrick as their first witness. He talked about the evening he found his ex-wife injured from a failed suicide attempt, and the moment he ran to the basement of their Duxbury home, where he saw the lifeless bodies of their 3 young children, 8-month-old Callan, 3-year-old Dawson, and 5-year-old Cora.
What did you see?
I saw Cora.
And how did she look?
She had a band around her neck.
And was that an exercise band?
Yeah.
The jury also listened to the harrowing 911 call Patrick made that night in January 2023. The audio so gut-wrenching, the judge would not allow anyone outside the courtroom to hear it. Patrick's heartbreaking screams and raw emotion bringing many to tears, including members of the jury and Lindsay Clancy herself. Patrick testified he received a call from Lindsay from her hospital bed a week after killing their children.
She said she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it now, she would lose her chance or something like that.
In just the first 2 days of the trial, the jury heard the most chilling testimony and saw the most chilling evidence, including the exercise bands Clancy used to strangle her children, the clothes they were wearing when they died, and a picture of a bloody knife Clancy used to try and take her own life.
If you could swear Miss Clancy in, please.
A week into the trial, the jury heard from Lindsay herself, admitting to certain facts about evidence in the case.
You are basically relieving the Commonwealth of its burden to prove those certain facts. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, is that what you want to do at this point?
Yes.
Much of the next few weeks of testimony focused on Clancy's mental health and treatment in the months leading up to the killings. Jurors heard from doctors, a former nanny, friends and family.
She told us that she had thoughts of harming the children. She said that she couldn't remember anything. The medication was pretty much just destroying her mind, and it wasn't her. She said, this isn't me. I just want to feel better and enjoy my kids again.
Jurors saw Clancy once again struggling during an emotional courtroom outburst as a medical examiner testified about the injuries to one of her children.
And what about injuries?
All right, counsel,
Perhaps one of the most shocking moments happened during the 4th week of the trial, as the prosecution asked a question that caused several people in the courtroom to gasp.
Now, are you an active member in the Catholic Church?
Yes.
So you're aware that murder is considered a mortal sin?
counsel, could I see you over here?
Victoria Price, 7 News.
The issue of religion came up again about a week later as a rebuttal witness for the prosecution called suicide a mortal sin. The defense called for a mistrial. The judge denied that, but told the jury they should not consider the testimony referencing religion in their deliberations. Again, mental health is at the center of this trial. If you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988 to speak with a counselor. Help is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Stay with the news station for continuing coverage of this breaking story as we wait for a verdict. You can find updates on air, online, and inside the 7 News app.
There is other news still ahead right now, including a developing story overseas. The death toll rising after flash flooding in Nepal. The latest on search and rescue efforts happening now.
More of a summer-like feel out there today with the humidity making a return. Small chance of a spot shower, too. We'll talk about it next.